Alrighty, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So excited to see a bunch of new faces here, a bunch of new names. Um, if you haven't seen already, we have a pre-show poll going on right now, just collecting a little bit of information about who's here and what your interests are in regards to climate education and careers and education levels and things like that. So go ahead and fill that poll out if you haven't already. But otherwise, let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending and welcome to our second Climate Careers Chat. My name is Isabella Gear and I will be co-moderating tonight.
And I'm Max Chang. I am a Climate Careers Chat team member and also the intern for Climate Careers Chat. So excited for you guys to be here. And Isabel is about to give you a brief overview of tonight's event.
After this, we will tell you a little bit more about our network. And then after that, we will introduce you to our panelists, Missy Stults and Adam Ratner. After that, we will have a break and we will also tell you about the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, something really special that our team does other than Climate Careers Chats. Then Adam Ratner will do his presentation. And then following both Missy Stults and Adam Ratner's presentations, we will have a Q&A time. So you get to ask them all the questions that you have about these two interesting people and what they do for a living. After the Q&A time, we will tell you about our youth leadership team, the people working behind the scenes during this event, and also as well as sustainable Contra Costa, who is also part of this event. And then finally, we will close the presentation.
So tonight's panel is the second of a recurring series that SLIA, or Sustainable Leaders in Action, produces. SLIA is the fully youth-led and youth team of Sustainable Contra Costa, which is a nonprofit organization based in Contra Costa County that works on promoting greener living and environmental activism within our county and beyond.
With all the serious environmental issues that we're facing today, education and action are more important than ever. We hope that this panel today can provide you with information that you can apply to your life, career, and anywhere else that you need it.
Again, thank you all for attending, and let's introduce today's panelists.
We created this panel to promote and showcase climate and sustainability-based careers. Today, we are joined by two professionals in marine biology and conservation, Missy Stults and Adam Ratner.
Missy Stults is a Sustainability and Innovations Manager at the City of Ann Arbor, and Adam Ratner is the Associate Director of Conservation and Education at the Marine Mammal Center. We are going to start with a short game of two truths and a lie to get to know them both a little bit better. I'm going to launch a poll real quick, and Missy, do you want to start off?
Sure, as the poll comes live. Fun times. Well, hello, everybody. It's so delightful to be able to spend an evening or late afternoon with you all for Two Truths and a Lie. Please tell me, which of these is not accurate? Did I play college basketball? Did I decide to start working on climate change after a happenstance encounter in an elevator with Dr. Jim Hansen? Or did I climb Mount Kilimanjaro while pregnant with my only daughter? Two of those things are true and one is a lie. What do you think? And Max, do you want me to do you want to wait to close the poll before I vote or before I go into it?
Minutes or
Yeah.
a few seconds.
And while you're doing that, I just want to thank you all so much. To the organizers, you've worked tirelessly, you care passionately, and it's come through. And to everyone for taking time to join this conversation tonight. I'm really excited to learn from you and to share a little bit about the really exciting journey that I've had the pleasure of going on my professional career. So thanks for being with us tonight.
So it looks like the votes are coming in. Are you guys able to see the results here?
Not yet. At least not on my side.
So it's looking like 48% of you have voted for Missy plays college basketball as the lie.
Are we ready? Do we have enough votes in to give the truth?
Yes, we do. I'm going to show
I
you.
actually did play college basketball. I have a scoring record at my college, which is just a fun little piece of trivia. And number 2 rebounding record. I loved college basketball. I was a Hoosier. I grew up in Indiana, so it's like part of our blood. I did meet Dr. Hansen in an elevator when I worked at NASA, the Goddard Institute for Space Studies, but I already worked at the Goddard Institute for Space Studies because I was working on climate. So that is the lie, but I did climb Kilimanjaro.
Oh,
23% you got it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Missy. And up next, we have Adam.
Hi, everybody. It is a real pleasure to be able to talk with all of you and so exciting to see so many people joining tonight. I decided for mine, I'd do 3 things related to careers if you want to be a biologist and focus on animal behavior. So you should see the poll up on the screen. One of these is a lie, which means 2 of these are true. I spent a year of my life teaching fish how to go through a maze. I spent 2 years of my life putting little tiny headphones on birds to test their hearing, or I actually lived on an abandoned island studying thousands of sea lions. What do we think?
That's a tough one.
Adam, I want them all to be true.
I know, right? All are possible if you become a marine biologist.
Oh, it's looking like most people are leaning towards the tiny headphones as a lie.
All right, I'll wait until I see the results up on the screen and then I'll share it.
I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1.
Ah, look at that. So I actually have pictures of my experience for 2 of these 3 things. So you will see that there's photographic evidence. Believe it or not, I did in fact spend 2 years of my life putting tiny headphones on birds to test their hearing. I also spent a year of my life teaching fish how to go through a maze. So I will talk all about my work with sea lions, but I have in fact not lived a year of my life on an abandoned island, but I have 2 coworkers that actually have. So that is a very possible career opportunity if that's something that gets you excited.
Wow, you have some amazing coworkers then. Now that we've gotten to know our panelists a little better, let's begin with Missy's presentation. If the audience has any questions during her presentation, please put them in the chat room to be answered later during our Q&A session towards the end. Please send your questions in the general chat instead of privately to Max and I or Missy, in case anyone else may have a similar question. Please include whether your question is for Missy, Adam, or both. And with that, let's begin with Missy's presentation.
Thanks, Isabel, and thanks, Matt. I decided to opt out for slides. I was working on them, and then I just felt like they were kind of a distraction. So I'm excited to talk to you today a little bit about the journey that I have been on, and the adventure continues. So with that, there's a theme that is underlying this, and there is no strong relationship. I think it's ironic, but marine biology is going to be a theme that's going to pop tonight. So my husband and I are failed marine biologists, as we sometimes joke, but it was the gateway for us that at least got me into the climate movement and got him into IT. So I guess you can use marine biology to go anywhere you want, perhaps was the lesson of today. I grew up in in Indiana in a community that was really, really supportive and really not for me. And I never knew that until I had left. And when I left, I played basketball, and so basketball was my gateway out. And I decided to go study marine biology. And I moved to Maine to a school about as far away as I could get from Indiana. For some reason, California was not on my short list. I think perhaps growing up a pretty conservative place, there might have been some undertones. Come to find out, I probably would have loved it more than anything in the world, but so be it. So I moved to Maine to study marine biology. I was captivated by the charismatic megafauna that I see in Adam's background that are just extraordinary. So I was really intrigued by humpback whale communication patterns and decided that that's what I was going to do. Right? I was going to study humpbacks. We were going to be best friends for life. I was going to tap the mystery of their communication patterns. And I loved it. I loved the study, and I loved the freedom, and I loved being away from home and questioning and really finding myself. And one of the courses, I decided to be a double major in marine biology and environmental sciences. And one of the required courses was on ethics. And it happened to be that we were studying the ethics of climate change. And I was done. I realized everything that I cared about, all of the animals that I wanted to study, the entire ecosystems that just mesmerized me. And of course, the people that I cared about were going to be impacted by this phenomenon. But I didn't know what to do with that. I knew I cared about it, and I knew I was going to be pulled in that direction, but I didn't really understand how. And so I had prepared myself to be a physical scientist. And I honestly thought that I would spend most of my time being fairly poor out on a boat, but really, really happy. And did a pause. So I finished my degree and looked across the country and said, where can I go understand climate change? But I don't want to be a climate scientist. Like, that is one thing that I knew pretty clearly. I didn't want to run the climate models. I really wanted to be at the intersection of climate and society. And that for me was because of that ethics class. It was because I was so concerned about what climate change meant for the people and the systems I cared about that I wanted to be interfacing with the people and the systems I cared about.
Can you get a job
I
working for climate?
do what?
Can you get a job working for climate?
Working in climate?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I will tell you about that. There's a lot of opportunities, especially now with the new administration putting a spotlight on climate change as a high priority. Absolutely.
Really?
So I went and transitioned to a master's program. I applied all over the country, actually. I applied to the Monterey Institute. I applied in Glasgow, Scotland. I applied anywhere that was doing really applied climate work, and got accepted into a brand new program, first year, first cohort at Columbia University, focused on climate and society. So we became what I'll call boundary spanners. We were trained to understand climate models, the really mathematically robust systems that come out, but we were also understand to answer what I call the so what question. So what? The climate is changing. What does it mean? What does it mean economically, culturally, politically? What does it mean for your place and the people that you love? And I was smitten, right? Like, that's where I found my people, I found my place, I found the kind of drive and my purpose. So one of the downsides about climate work for me is everyone I know that does this work can't break from this work. So sometimes my partner in crime, my life partner, is a wonderful human being who happens to work in IT, as I mentioned, and he can stop working. I don't stop working, right? I walk down the street and I'm thinking about transportation planning and patterns. I go to the store and I'm thinking about the waste profile of what we purchase or how we purchase and how we dispose of it. And so there's this really interesting, exciting part of the job and a really exhausting part of this job. So to kind of go back, I was lucky enough to go get this degree at Columbia and work quite a lot in New York City. I was able to actually do New York City, help them with their first greenhouse gas emissions inventory and their first assessment of how climate change was going to impact New York City's water supply, which is the largest unfiltered water supply in the country. I, from there, was able to work on some international negotiations and discovered very quickly, too slow. I don't move at that pace. It is a very important pace. I do not have it in me. I move fast. I talk fast. I care really deeply, and I need to see progress. And so I have incredible respect for people that play at an international scale, but that's not my scale. So I had an opportunity to go join a nonprofit that was working with local governments around the world on climate and sustainability. And I had the option of going and leading their programs in the Northeast in Boston, out of Boston, and I took it. So that was really my full-time integration into domestic and local climate work. So I grew in that organization to eventually become the climate director, where I oversaw all climate adaptation and mitigation programs happening in about 1,000 local governments around the US. So I was at a 30,000 foot view, and I would get to talk to New York City and LA about what they were doing and help strategize. I also got to work in Devens, Massachusetts, a community of 550 people, as they were thinking about climate, or Indigenous and tribal populations, where they were thinking about their own sovereignty and how climate intersected with that. And it was fascinating. And then I got hungry to do it, right? It was fun to kind of be at the 30,000 foot view, but I really wanted to get my hands kind of more entrenched in the space. So I got pulled to the corporate sector for a hot second to try some things. And you're going to pick up a theme of experimentation, right? I think very few people find their perfect job and stay with it anymore. And I think that's absolutely fine. So I was pulled to the private sector and lasted 10 months. I despised it. I am not profit driven. I do not care about making money for anybody else. And I learned, and I needed to learn that, right? Like I thought that was true, but I learned that. I am mission driven. I need to have a purpose, a vision for the work that I do. And I was so unhappy. And I looked for any escape route. And the escape route that came to me was a PhD, believe it or not. So I decided what I was going to do was go do a PhD, an applied PhD at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I was going to be really, really foolish and attempt to do two of them at the same time. But I was going to work while I did that to stay grounded, because I knew I didn't want to go into academia, but I also knew that I wanted to make sure no one had an excuse not to invite me into the conversation anymore. So I got hired to work on the US National Climate Assessment while doing my PhD, and helped write the chapter on local climate adaptation. And I consulted 20 hours a week with practitioners around the US. So I was helping them do their climate work, like actually doing their climate work, but not doing it for them, helping them build the capacity to do that work. And then I was doing my PhD, and it was just a job for me. I had peers who their identity was really closely tied to their research and the work that they did. And for me, my PhD was about telling the story of practitioners. And so one of the tensions that I have faced throughout my whole career is the tension between theory and practice. And so it's really fun to pontificate on what's possible, but when you actually get into the driver's seat in a lot of these initiatives, you find that's just not feasible for a slew of reasons. So I did a dual PhD. I did a PhD in urban planning and a PhD in natural resources and the environment, and I studied resilience, the topic of it, and I can geek out with all of you about that should you want to geek out with me later. But I finished that experience and was going to DC in the Clinton climate office that she was going to form. But I don't know if anyone followed what happened. We were all pretty devastated when we saw the upset in the administration. So one of my PhD advisors was one of the science advisors to Obama and had been working on the Clinton campaign, and that was what was going to happen. And I now had expertise in, of course, what was happening locally from a practical standpoint, and I had a PhD on local climate work. And so I knew what was happening theoretically and practically. And so that was where I was going. I was going to help launch, center this in the federal administration. So we don't just talk about what's possible, but we really push the limits of what's possible, right? Like we walk the line of possibility. And that's where I wanted to intersect. And overnight, we had no future. We didn't know what was happening, because like many people, what happened was impossible. We didn't see it. So it was a gut punch for many reasons. Of course, one was a national gut punch of like, what is this saying and what's happening with our country right now, and how did we miss this? And then there was, I don't have a job, right? I don't know what I'm going to do in this space. And so I decided to go back to the consulting roots, where I'd been working with lots of local and Indigenous practitioners, and continued to do that, and then started to work for foundations. So philanthropy. As they were making investments in local governments, I was helping them craft the way they made investments so that they were making really targeted and pointed investments that were centering equity in their work, understanding disproportionate vulnerability, disproportionate climate impacts. And it was fascinating and also frustrating, right? Because I don't have this money to be allocating out. I'm just giving someone some advice on how to make a decision. Are you guys bored out of your minds yet? You doing okay? All right, we're getting towards the end. Okay, so what ended up happening is I decided I wanted to be at a home institution. I didn't want to kind of go out and blow in the wind. So I applied for a job at the University of Washington in Seattle to run their climate programs throughout the West Coast. And I got offered that job, and I accepted that job, but said I have to finish my contracts, right? Like I've got work for all of these practitioners, and I've got to finish that before I come. And they were like, okay. Well, after I accepted that, I got a phone call from a recruiter in the city of Ann Arbor, where I'm living and was living at the time. And they said, hey, we're going to start the sustainability office. And, you know, we've heard like you're involved locally. I was on the planning or transportation commission. I was super active, you know, while I was doing my PhD locally. Like we've been told we should like talk to you. I was like, well, you know, I've accepted another job, so I'm happy to give you recommendations. I know people in the community, but I just don't feel like I can't, right? Like I've accepted this other job. And they were like, well, okay, let's talk tomorrow and we'll just get your recommendations on other people. And at that point I was like, well, I'm heading to Chicago right now for a board meeting for some work I'm doing, but okay, like, well, I'll do this. Like, let's have this call. So we get on the phone and it's the recruiter and it's the city manager for Ann Arbor. And I was like, you are interviewing me, right? Like, I know what is happening right now. This is devious, but I don't need a job. So I'm just going to be really honest with you. And I doubt many of you know much about Ann Arbor. We are a blue dot in a sea of red, and we're a purple state now, which is very, very exciting. We often call ourselves the Republic of Ann Arbor. We sort of stand out, but it's pretty greenwashed. And I wasn't going to have any of that in this conversation. Here I am talking to the decision maker for the city, and this is my chance. And so I tell him what I think. I think that Ann Arbor's rested on its laurels for decades. I think that it was a champion and it's not anymore. And I think it's time that the community makes a decision on whether climate is really a priority or not, because it's not okay to pretend. And it's not okay to not make investments anymore in this topic. So we went through and we had this great conversation. We hang up the phone, and 10 minutes later, the recruiter calls and is like, you have the job. And I sort of chuckled to myself, said, I can't accept this job, right? Like, I'm not looking for a job. And they said, well, listen, why don't you just come in for one more face-to-face interview at this point? So long story short, I am going to Seattle because I've accepted this job, and we are flying to Seattle that night. It's a Friday to close on a house. Right, we've made an offer and we are going to close on the house. And they said, just come in Friday morning. And I come in Friday morning and I talk to this panel. And again, no filter at this point, right? Like, this is my chance. I am sitting at the table with all the executives of the city, and I tell them what I think we could be doing as a community. And I love this community. This is Ann Arbor, is where my daughter was born. We have this great conversation. And I leave, and the recruiter says, how much time do we have before you go? I said, you've got 4 hours. Like, I'll be on a plane in 4 hours. So I get to the airport and the phone call comes. And they say, it's a city administrator. It's like, I want to offer you this job. And what I'm going to share in this, because this is like my fun lifetime story, is I would have never right out of school or early in my profession been able to do what I did. But all of those previous experiences that I had by bouncing around, by getting exposure, by building a network, got me to a point where in that conversation with him, I knew exactly what to ask for, right? I had worked with lots of local governments. I understood the kind of structure that they needed, where they needed to be located within a government, sustainability and climate officers. I understood the kind of funding support, the kind of political support that they needed, and I asked for it all on the phone. I said, the only way I'm staying is if you give me an office, you give me a budget. I'm an executive of the city. And ex-wife, and he said, "You got it." And I said, "Put it in writing." And we left the airport. And so in that moment, we did not go back to Ann Arbor where we were living. We went to a third-party place because I couldn't be in Ann Arbor because I was emotionally struggling with what was going to happen, and I couldn't be in Seattle. And you know how it ended. I took the job in Ann Arbor, and for 2.5 years, I've had the pleasure of being the city's first sustainability director. I have, when I started at the city, I had a budget of $151. Today, I have a budget of just shy of $2 million, and I am asking for a budget of almost $10 million this coming. Well, I'm asking for it right now. I don't think we're going to get it because of COVID, but we were on track to get it. I'm preparing our community for a tax, a carbon tax, or a climate tax broadly. I don't know if it'll pass, but we're holding a mirror up to our community locally. We like to say that we care about this issue, and I'm going to test it and see how far we can go. So my job is to make sure Ann Arbor is the most sustainable and equitable community in America. You may not know where we are yet, but you will. And our stated goal, I got our elected leaders to adopt a new plan called A20, which sets the goal of being carbon neutral as an entire community in a just and equitable way by 2030. So I have 9.5 years to figure out how to do this, and we are active. So we work on all things. I have a team of 6. I'm asking for a team of 12 in the next budget to grow it. I have a partner organization that stand beside me. We have 75 partners that span our housing, our disability alliances, our climate community, our traditional environmental community, our justice community, and we're making sure we're a force to be reckoned with in our conversations. So I will not be in Ann Arbor for the rest of my life. I will move on to something else. But in this moment in time, I say that my job is to be the chief disruptor. I have to disrupt the systems that aren't working. Our socioeconomic systems are unjust. We have racial disparities that exist. And of course, climate change is wreaking havoc. So I think the only option that we have in the face of all of those things is to disrupt the systems that aren't working. So that's what I get to do every single day. And I cry frequently and I smile a lot. And sometimes I do all of those things in the same minute. So it's a fun job, and I'm happy to talk to you about what it's like.
Like I said, it's really rare that people get a chance to hear such genuine, just such genuine experiences from a climate career, especially one that involves government and civics. So thank you for what you've done for us.
Oh, anytime. What journey is linear? I mean, I can't wait to hear Adam's story. Like, life is an adventure, right? It's not the destination's predetermined.
So I know we're on a break right now, but I just wanted to say, Missy, I'm a middle school science teacher and a climate activist, and you are amazing.
Oh,
You are stunning. What your story was fantastic. And I just want you to know that what just happened back there is, Zoom bomber kind of thing, but you did great. And teachers are so envious of what you do.
oh,
Meaning, just thank you for what you do.
That's really generous. Thank you. I think you probably deserve more credit. If I could flip a switch, there's a few policy changes I'd make, and one is I think our teachers should be compensated way more, because you don't get people at the other end without really good teachers. So thank you for the service that you provide to all of us.
Well, teachers were only here because of our awesome students. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, teachers. I really appreciate all you do for us students, and I probably wouldn't be here and leading this team to make these events without a lot of guidance and inspiration I've gotten in the past from everyone like you. So I think we're ready to start with Adam's presentation. Adam, are you ready?
I am. So I do have some slides because given what I shared in the Two Truths and a Lie, I figured I had to show pictures or it doesn't count. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here. excited to be able to share my story with all of you. So I'm at the Marine Mammal Center, which is out in the San Francisco Bay Area, right across from the Golden Gate Bridge, essentially. And with a background in kind of marine biology, I wanted to highlight all of the different pathways that are possible. And I'll kind of share my story, but know that there are so many different ways into the field of climate, into biology, into animal behavior. And hopefully you can all find the path that works for you. It's very rare that I start any talk with kind of as early as I do, but I wanted to actually share just a little bit about what it was like for me growing up before I get into the climate career. I think this is the only talk I will ever show a picture of me as a toddler. But I figured it was important, and you'll see how this kind of transitions through my story. I grew up in a really supportive family and a wonderful community, but I really struggled in school. As a really young kid, like the one that you see in the picture here, I could barely talk. I was diagnosed with a learning disability. I had a speech impediment. It was rough. I had a lot of support, but it was really tough in school, in elementary school, in middle school. I wasn't doing well on tests, and it was a problem. But I was able to find my passions, and I was able to find the community to help support me. And one of the things that I realized as I was getting older is I had the opportunity, I grew up on the East Coast, to kind of explore different worlds. I was in a world at the time that wasn't everything that I wanted to be. And then all of a sudden I got underneath the water and I had the chance to go snorkeling, and I realized that there was an entire world under the waves that we just never see. All of these animals, this whole ecosystem. And I realized pretty quickly, wow, I love this. And I want to study the ocean. I want to study animals. And I can't imagine I'm unique with that. I always joke that I have the job that basically every like 7-year-old wants for a living. And I just never grew out of it. But it was a little bit of a winding path that I want to take you through. So I got into college and decided, all right, the things that I'm really interested in, I love marine biology, I love animals, and I love psychology. I was really interested in how the brain works and how we behave. And I started taking classes in those, and it's really a process of take a bunch of things when you have the opportunity and see if you like it or not. I always like, oh my God, I love biology. I want to be a biologist. And then I went into a cellular biology class and a microbiology class. And I was like, wow, I hate this so much. Like, I just cannot stand the little microscopic things. It's not how my brain works. I want the big stuff. I want to study things that I can see. And it was only through trying some of these things that I was able to really figure out where my passions were. So that's a really exciting thing that I encourage you as you're in high school, as you think about classes that you take moving forward, to try things out. And that goes not just for the academics, but as I got into college, I wanted to push myself. I wanted to challenge myself. And given some of the struggles I had growing up, there was something that kind of popped up. Someone had asked me if I was interested in doing it. And I figured it'd be the perfect challenge for me. And it was public speaking. It was being a tour guide at my college. And standing up in front of a bunch of people and having to answer all these questions, and being a kid that didn't talk or didn't talk well growing up, this was my challenge. And I realized I loved it. And I realized I figured out secrets to how to be okay with it. So I started thinking, all right, how do I take all of this stuff and put it together once college ended? And it's tough because you might not find your perfect job right away, and you might not know what it is that you want to do. So the same way when I was taking classes, I experimented and I said, hey, let me try this or try that. I did the same thing, and I looked for what was out there, and I took a very winding path, as you saw in my 2 Truths and a Lie. I worked with birds, and I put little tiny headphones on top of birds' heads to test their hearing. And while the picture is incredibly cute, I admit, there was a reason for this. And it was that we wanted to see how birds might change their behaviors based off the environment that they live in. Did they vocalize more when there was more background noise? So if we pumped in a bunch of city noise and then we put them together with all their friends, did they talk more or did they talk less? or if it was silent, or if there were stranger birds as opposed to their flock. How did they change their behavior? Because if we don't know how these animals react to changes in the environment, we might not be able to protect them when there are changes that take place. And that was really interesting work. I worked with some incredibly smart people at the University of Maryland. But after 2 years of doing that and listening to maybe 200,000 bird calls, I realized a couple things. The first is that I actually just don't like birds that much. I respect them, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't mean I have to really like them. They bit, they talked back, and it just wasn't the thing for me. So I realized, all right, I love this idea of animal behavior though. How do we study these animals to figure out how they think and how they behave? So I moved on to my next animal, fish. And I wanted to study how fish learn and remember, because they get this really bad reputation, but they have this system. They've been able to thrive throughout the oceans. So I took what they call zebrafish. That's what you're seeing here. And one of the things about zebrafish is they've mapped the entire genome of the zebrafish. So they know all of the different genes and DNA that goes into the zebrafish. And they've used zebrafish for lots of different things around medical studies before. But I was always really intrigued because anytime I hear about fish and I hear about learning and behavior, I hear about the goldfish. So I had this thought of, wouldn't it be really cool if instead of doing all of these behavior things on one fish and all of these gene things and DNA on the other, can we combine them? Can we start to figure out through the behavior, match those to genes, can we learn a lot more? So it was a very kind of simple study in a sense that I did, but I wanted to see if the fish could learn a pattern, if they could tell the difference between colors, and if they could swim through different hoops. And it took a lot of time, but I was able to do it. And we're now able to start to think about, all right, how do we combine these different fields of science together? Because that's when we can have more impact than everyone doing their own thing. How do we build up towards something? Now, after a year of working with fish, I also realized something. They weren't my favorite either. They're fish, they're great, but I wanted something different. And as I started thinking about all these things, and I started looking at what we already know about birds and what we already know about fish, we know a lot about them. And I happened to go to a conference where I was just walking along and looking at some of these different posters and listening to all these different talks. And I walked up to someone who was an expert in blue whales. Now, I love blue whales. Compared to things like fish and birds, like this is my stuff, the big charismatic stuff. And the thing that's really interesting about blue whales is that I was teaching a class for first and second graders. And I walked into that class and I held up a picture of a blue whale, and every kid in that class could identify it as a blue whale. There's something really special about that, this idea of awareness of some of these animals. Now, at this conference I was at, though, I walked up to a researcher, a scientist who had been studying blue whales his entire life, basically. And I asked a really simple question. At least I thought it was a simple question. I asked him, how old can blue whales get? What's the life expectancy of a blue whale? And he couldn't really answer me. And then another question, well, where do they give birth? Where do the blue whales have their babies? Because in California, we're really lucky, the San Francisco Bay Area, that every summertime, if you get on a boat, you go out around 26 miles off the coast, you can see blue whales. But the researcher didn't know where they gave birth. We had never seen a blue whale give birth before. Now, this is a big animal. This picture is not doing it justice. Blue whales are 100 feet long. They're the size of an entire basketball court. Their heart is the size of a car. Their tongue weighs more than an elephant. But yet we didn't know simple things about them. How long can they live? Where do they go? Where do they have their babies? And it was at that point that I realized these are the things that I want to learn about. These are the questions that are so exciting to me. But it took a little bit of time getting through the birds, getting through the fish to start to get to that. It was only through that process. So I said, all right, I want to do marine mammals. And I had the opportunity to be out on boats and be in labs studying some of these animals. The problem that I found, though, was I was studying these animals and all of a sudden I saw them getting sick. I saw that whales were getting hit by boats. I saw that seals were getting caught in trash. I saw all of the things around climate change and how the ocean was warming and becoming more acidic, and that was going to impact animals. And I realized that I couldn't just sit on a boat. I couldn't just sit in a lab and try and answer these questions of how do they talk to each other, or where do they go, or how long do they live. I wanted to save them, because it's one thing to be able to learn how old can they get, but if there are no more blue whales out there once you're done answering that question, there's not a lot we can do. So I switched fields and I said, you know, maybe I'm not going to do the hard sciences, if you will. What I want to do is I want to do conservation work. And that got me to this place called the Marine Mammal Center. And I've been here for the last 12 years at this point. And the Marine Mammal Center is the world's largest marine mammal hospital. And it's an education facility. So what we do is if there's a sick or injured seal, sea lion, dolphin, whale found within 600 miles of California coast, we get a phone call from someone like you that will see it out on the beach. We'll send our team of trained rescuers out there and we'll rescue that animal. We'll bring it to our hospital. We'll get it better. And the day it feels better and it gets a clean bill of health, it goes back out into the ocean happy and healthy again. And we've got a hospital in California and out in Hawaii doing this. And I realized that this is now a perfect combination of some of the things that I really love. We're helping individual animals. So that sea lion that you see right in the bottom corner there was named Principal. We were on a school supply theme for naming them. The one right in the middle is a baby elephant seal named Mona. These animals were found sick and dying out on the beach. But through an amazing community of support, people help get these animals better and give them a second chance at life. Now, this is something that people can get involved in. These are jobs within sustainability and conservation and marine biology. We've got this 24-hour hotline so that people are going out and rescuing animals that are sick or hurt. You've got the ability to become a veterinarian and help do the medical care for these animals. Now, I, through just volunteer work, have been able to rescue animals before through my work here. And people as young as 15 can start volunteering with the Marine Mammal Center. I've been able to work alongside veterinarians giving medication to these animals. You see 2 of our veterinarians doing surgery on a sea otter. All the animals that we're working with, if we can get them better, that's our goal. They go back out to the wild happy and healthy again. But that's not the end of the work. And that's what really made me stay at the Marine Mammal Center, because this is really rewarding work. You can only imagine, and you can waste a lot of hours of your life on our YouTube channel page, watching these animals get released back out to the ocean. But I wanted something more. I didn't just want to save each individual animal, because at a certain point, that's not the goal. The goal is to make sure they stop getting sick in the first place. And this is what brought me back in, because, ooh, I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher. Well, let's figure out what's making them sick then. And we were the first to discover things like cancer in these animals. We were the first to discover different algae and toxins that can make them sick, to discover parasites, to figure out the food they're going after and how it's changing. So we're publishing all these papers and working with people all around the world to be able to answer some of these questions that were always so intriguing to me as I was growing up and after I left college. And then that experience I had as a tour guide, thinking, I really like sharing these stories. I really like inspiring people. And the Marine Mammal Center has tons of education programs. Before COVID and after COVID is done, we see around 100,000 visitors that come through our front doors. It's free to come and look at the animals at our hospital and talk to our experts. We've got online programs right now where you can talk with some of these different experts and see some of the stories of our patients in action. And I realized this was the perfect melding of what I wanted to do, because it's not just doing the science. I wanted to actually make the science mean something. I wanted to change behaviors, and this is how we can do it. So my job for the last 12 years, through all of these different roles, is kind of coalesced around the idea of how do we take all of this really amazing science that we're doing and actually figure out how to talk about it in the right way. Because it's one thing to just give people a lot of facts. We've all heard facts about climate change. We've all heard facts about the risks of smoking or why you shouldn't text and drive. But that doesn't always mean people do those behaviors. Well, let's use science to try and figure out how we can talk about these issues where it does create the change that we want to see. And that's been one of my biggest passions over the last few years. Bringing people together, like the climate scientists, pairing them up with educators and pairing them up with social psychologists, people that will actually test what words we use when we talk about climate change. And let's build this community of support. Let's figure out how to get enough people singing the same song that's scientifically tested to create the change we want to see. And let's get as many people as possible in on this so that they feel inspired and they feel empowered to be those climate ambassadors or those ocean trash ambassadors. And what I love so much about these collaborations is that it means we don't have to tackle this stuff by ourselves anymore. Missy, I think, mentioned it really well. Being in the field of conservation or climate can be really tough sometimes. There are a lot of things happening in the world that aren't great. But it's always helpful to have that support system. And what I found is by bringing together people, having that family of communicators or scientists where we can go back to them and say, hey, I was just having this conversation about climate change and it didn't go great. Let's talk this through. That has been such a huge thing. Or, oh, I'm just having a really rough day today because of this news story I heard about climate change. Let's talk it over, and you've got that social and emotional support. It goes the other way too. I get to hear all the fun things and all the exciting news that they did. And oh my God, we just launched this program and this entire group of students was able to talk to their school board and get solar panels put on their roof at their school. And I get to live vicariously through that. So there are so many opportunities here where you can fit in at any level within climate or conservation or marine biology, and you have skills that you can bring to the table. No matter what you've heard growing up, no matter what struggles you face, there is a role for you. I want you to know that. Now, I want to just finish with one last quote here because I think it speaks to something both Missy and I have touched on around climate, because it can be tough. This is something from Paul Hawken. He wrote an amazing book and runs an organization called Drawdown, which looks at what actions we can take around climate. And he said, if you look at the science about what is happening on Earth and aren't pessimistic, you don't understand data. But if you meet the people who are working to restore the Earth and you aren't optimistic, you haven't got a pulse. And this is kind of the world we have to live in. But I promise you, if you can find these people and you continue to use your passion and network with other people working to restore the Earth, it will help carry you through. Find those people that share that passion for you and that job or that career that sparks that in you, and you're going to be great moving forward. So with that, I will show 2 more pictures of adorable animals because it's just what I have to do. And I'll stop sharing, and I know we've got questions and an opportunity for a few other things to be shared. So thank you all for listening and excited for some of the questions you have.
Thank you, Adam. That was super inspiring, and especially I'm sure makes myself and the rest of the Climate Careers Chat team feel amazing about what we do and thankful for everything people like you and Missy do in the world.
I can second that, yes.
And it's time you've all been waiting for, time to ask your questions. So if you haven't already, start putting them in the chat, and I and Isabel will look through that and ask our panelists.
Yes, and before I start answering or directing questions towards our panelists, I just want to shout out that Max and I will try our best to get to every question. So, but please also pay attention to the other questions that our other guests might be sharing in case it might be similar to yours.
And please make sure you say who your question is for, Missy or Adam or both.
Yes. And please remember to send it in the general chat instead of sending it privately to Max and I or to any of our panelists. Now, for our first question is from Lisa S. This will be directed towards Missy. Could you please shed more detail on your experience with international climate negotiations? I'm interested on working at the intersection of environmental, legal, and international work. So, Missy?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. So I've been to a handful of COPs, which are very fascinating, but most of my experience came from working with an entity called the Coalition for Rainforest Nations, where historically in the Kyoto Protocol, you could get credit for reforestation, so planting trees where they existed previously, but you cut them down, or afforestation for planting trees where they didn't exist before, but there was no credit for avoided deforestation. And so places like Papua New Guinea or the Congo or Costa Rica were not being incentivized not to cut down their forests. And so this was clearly an omission in that process. And so we organized numerous countries, including those I've just listed, to come together and try to get the Kyoto Protocol changed so that avoided deforestation could be integrated. And we had to prepare. We got to do very, very fun and cool things, but we got prepare and went before the member nations of the UN and got a unanimous vote that the Kyoto Protocol should be changed to make that effective. And this is where I fell. They said, you have 10 years to figure out how. And I said, we have unanimous support in 10 years? Like, I'm out. So for me, that was a little bit too slow of a process. But for many others, I mean, that is a really important stage to be playing at. It just wasn't the stage for me.
Thank you, Missy.
Here is a question from Hussein L, actually for both panelists. And they just want you to restate the organizations that you're currently involved with and just kind of briefly describe like what your position entails in like a few words.
Go for it, Adam.
Sure. So my organization is the Marine Mammal Center. So that's where I've worked for the last 12 years. And then I'm a part of a few different collaborations. The one I showed you at the very end that had the like social scientists and the climate scientists working together is a collaboration across around 200 organizations called the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, which is a huge mouthful. But what I can do is I'll put the website in the chat box so you can look into that if you want some of the stuff around like the science of how we talk about climate change. It's one of my favorite organizations to be a part of.
And they also want to know, you mentioned that people visit the Marine Mammal Center. Obviously, it's probably closed right now because of COVID, but could you briefly describe like what a experience is like as a guest and if maybe you have any Zoom programs or online interaction going on?
Yeah, of course. So we are closed, unfortunately, due to COVID, and we do not know when we'll be able to reopen again. We obviously want to, but we want to be safe. But I'll put the website, so it's www.marinemammalcenter.org. And when we're open to the public, you can come and walk through, and it's really transparent. So we've got big viewing windows. So you can look into our fish kitchen and our laboratory and out over the patient pens and see how we're getting the animals better. And we do tours, and we do classroom programs and school programs and all of that stuff. During COVID, everything's virtual, but it means that it's a lot easier to see some of these things now because you don't have to worry about driving all the way into the national park near the Golden Gate Bridge. So we've got what we call Marine Mammal Mondays, which is one of my favorite programs. So the first Monday of every month, it's a free Facebook Live event where we talk about different animals and different species. So there's one coming up actually this next Monday, since it's the first Monday. We're talking all about marine mammal parents and pups. So just like brace yourself for some adorable photos of baby marine mammals. And then we've got other things as well. So we've got a Stewardship Saturday program for high school students. When we're able to open up again, we've got a volunteer program for high school students and adults. So lots of different things. So check out the website. I'll put it in the box in just a minute.
Adam, I so am in love with what you do. I cannot stop right now. It's just like, oh, thank you for what you do and the passion that you have. Oh, my heart is on.
Likewise, I get to work around really cute animals. You have to deal with people a little bit more, so it goes. You get the extra credit, I think.
I'm not sure. To the question about organizations, so I work for the City of Ann Arbor, Michigan, but I have a great network of folks just like Adam elucidated in his talk. I am the outgoing president of the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, those focusing on preparing for climate change, physically, emotionally, culturally, mentally, et cetera. I am connected to the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, Great Lakes Climate Adaptation Network, the state of Michigan, and then of course, just the network. Perhaps the most important advice I can give is build your own network. I have peers who I hold close. The field is very small. I imagine Adam and I are maybe 1 or 2 people removed from knowing each other because people working in this space, especially any connection to climate, it's pretty tight knit. So hold people close, invest in your relationships. I'm now really lucky to be at a point where we have text chains going almost every night to say, who's in the administration? Like, who did Biden pick up now? Because we're starting to know, like, those are our friends that are starting to go to DC and have these roles. And that's really exciting to see. So use your networks well.
Thank you. Our next question is from Karen R. This will be directed towards Missy. What would you recommend to someone who wants to get involved in climate change but doesn't have a degree related to it?
I would say the networking is really important too. Getting any kind of experience you can, even volunteering. And the other thing is finding the right people. I don't hire people based on their educational background. Yes. I am looking for people with passion and an interest because I can teach you how to do a greenhouse gas inventory. I can teach you how to assess vulnerability, but I can't teach you how to care about this topic. And so I'm looking for people that bring passion towards. I also say there is really notable disparity, especially racial disparity, if we focus just on education. And so I am really looking much more for experiential, experiences that people have had. Those are the kinds of people. You have to have passion and have some experience doing the work. So in this case, I think the question was like marketing and communication. Heck yes, we are awful in local government. We are awful in the climate world. We work so hard doing our job and we never tell our story. That is an asset. Use your asset. I don't have that skill. So I think that there's a really nice entree in. Just start networking would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly add on to that because my role at the Marine Mammal Center is really interesting. So half of my job is technically part of our education team or our learning and community team. My other half of my job is actually the marketing and communications team because we don't have a department for conservation or for sustainability. So it just goes to show that if you've got a skill set, it can fit in to sustainability really well. And to echo Missy, particularly marketing communications, if you can tell stories, you are going to be an amazing asset for how we change the world moving forward.
And our next question comes from Jacob R. This one's for Missy. Missy, what are you doing to push? What are you doing so far to push towards carbon neutrality in your community?
Are you ready? Okay, a lot, not enough, but here we go. We have a local solar program where we're working with installers to buy down the cost of solar. So we're getting solar installed at roughly 40% off the market price because you're getting the tax incentive and then you're getting a bulk buy discount. We are working on our very first community solar program, 24 megawatt install. We're starting to investigate neighborhood geothermal. We have a decarbonization plan that we're working on with a neighborhood. It's a low income minority centered neighborhood, and they're helping us co-design what a whole home health comfort and decarbonization plan could look like for them. Oh my gosh. We are working on resilience hubs. We've got our first one stood up in a neighborhood. We just did that this summer, and I can talk about what that means in a second. I'm working on policy change at the state level, so I spend not an insignificant amount of time going in and testifying before the House and the Senate. on necessary changes. I'm also starting to give input to the Biden administration on the kinds of changes and support infrastructure that we need. We have a transportation plan that centers 0 traffic fatalities and 0 greenhouse gas emissions. So working with my colleagues in engineering to figure out how we're redesigning our roads to prioritize people and bikes as opposed to vehicle traffic, which, by the way, people will hate you as soon as you start, like, that sounds nice. You will never get as much anger directed at you when you slow down traffic. Like, that's the thing that people just cannot tolerate. Working on the commercial sector, we're working on an energy benchmarking ordinance, which actually will go for public comment on Monday, which will require our commercial enterprises and our multifamily housing to disclose their energy use, eventually building, we hope, towards a performance standard. We are about to launch our task force on a green rental efficiency standard, meaning you cannot rent, you cannot get a certification of occupancy if you do not hit a certain energy performance. So renters should not live in drafty places that are unsafe. That is unacceptable. And so we're working on that. And then we're also launching a time of marketing. So when you sell a home, just like I'm going to guess many of you have not bought a home yet, but when you do, should you ever want to do that, there's a lot of information you can get about the neighborhood, crime rates. We want you to be able to know about the energy and water performance of that home so you can factor it into your decision making. Those are just some of the things. We have 23 initiatives that are active right now, and we're working towards a set of 44. So a lot. I'll drop a link in the chat where you can check out a little bit more.
Thank you, Missy. Our next question is from Sarah Kay, and this will be directed towards Adam. Adam, could you please describe a day in the life of your career?
It's a tough one to answer, actually, and something that I love about my job because every day is different. Every day we get phone calls from people out on the beach that see sick and hurt animals. So you never know if that day you're going to get a phone call about a 2,000-pound elephant seal out on the beach or a 5-pound baby sea otter. So that keeps me and definitely a lot of my colleagues on our toes. I don't do as much of the animal care these days, but I tell the stories of them. So what I'm doing a lot is talking with our scientists and our researchers and our animal care people to figure out, all right, what are they rescuing? What are they seeing? I'm also then talking with our scientists and saying, all right, bigger picture, not like what animal do we rescue, but what are the themes? What are the trends that we're seeing? So are we seeing a lot more skinny sea lions coming in? Does that mean that maybe the prey, the food they love is shifting? And what does that mean? And then a lot of what I focus on right now is what we refer to as capacity building. It's trying to make sure that we are training and coaching and teaching enough voices, because there are a lot of people out there that want to do or want to talk about climate change or already talking about climate change. But there's a lot to learn. And sometimes you feel like you're trying to take on this big battle all by yourself. And what my goal is let's bring people together. So I do a lot of these workshops and partnerships where we get teachers and we get scientists and we get educators from all around the world together to share our best practices and say, hey, this is what we've tried that works really well. And here are some tools that you can use. Because that makes me better because I learn all of the things from these really smart people. But it also means that if, let's say you've got a person who is a huge fan of zoos and aquariums. So they go online and they watch a program that the Monterey Bay Aquarium does. And then they go online and they watch something from the National Zoo. And then they come to the Marine Mammal Center and they watch a tour, or they go on a tour outside of COVID times. Wouldn't it be great if they were hearing the same story in a sense? So we all have our own flair, but we're all using some similar language so it helps people learn and remember and be motivated to ask. And that's what I want to do. I want to change the national conversation on climate change. And I want to make it more solutions focused. I want to make it more community minded so you don't have to feel like you're tackling everything by yourself. And I want to make it more positive. That's my goal, and that's what I spend most of my time trying to bring people together to figure out that story.
Thank you.
And the next question comes from Alexi L. This is actually for both panelists. And They are asking, have you ever felt overwhelmed by environmental problems around the world? And how have you motivated yourself to move forward? Cute elephant seals.
Every day. I mean, the reality of this work is that it's hard and that humanity is not yet rising to the challenge at the magnitude and scale that we need to. But I think Adam's quote that he highlighted from Paul Hawken is really critical. I will say I'm going to give you generally one piece of advice. I have had people come into my office who, let me frame from this way. I'm going to go more personal. I love animals, right? And that is why I wanted to go into marine biology. What I can't handle is animal abuse. I can't emotionally hold it. I can't deal with it. I can't be in that space, but I love it, right? And it's like such a core part of my being is protecting animals. So I learned very early that I wasn't going to be able to be a professional that spent every day looking at that kind of abuse and mistreatment, but instead my charitable giving was going to be in that space. I know people who look at climate in the same way. They can't handle the emotion of this space. This can't be the profession for you. If that's true, find a way to volunteer your time to contribute. But for me, the way that I get through that, when I'm able to do it, right? That I am able to hold optimism in my core and to work and surround myself with people who can kind of fill my cup, because my cup often gets empty. And then when my cup is full, help fill their cup to keep going. Also, I get to do the work, right? So if I'm feeling despairingly about something that's happening at an international level, I can push really, really hard now to see a policy change locally. And that policy change might just be a little bit of a bright light for someone else. And I never know when that light's going to be contagious. So there's an ability that I have because of the work that I do and the networks that I have to stay optimistic in this space. But I do want to say, do not despair. If you care deeply, but you can't find space for you in this profession, that is okay. You can still be a part of it in a different way. Like, I'm excited to hear what Adam has to say so I can take some notes here.
So I think Max jokingly said cute seal photos, and if that's what it takes, do it. No judgment on that one. I think for me, there are a few things that stand out, and I'll mimic what Missy said. It's about having that support network so that you feel like you can rely on them if you need to at times, if you're feeling a little bit low and overwhelmed, and they can do the same for you. I think the other piece is that there's so many solutions out there, and there's so many people that want to help, that there are very few people around the world that want to see climate change become a kind of apocalypse upon us. A lot of people just don't know how they can be a part of it. And that's the opportunity that I see and what drives me, because if we can bring more people into the fold and they can see how they can be the hero in their community, perfect. Because I can't be the hero in every community. I'm probably not even the hero in my own community. I definitely know I'm not. So how do we empower those heroes? And everyone can be a hero in their community, whether your community is your school, whether it's your house, whether it's your neighborhood, your sports team, whatever it is. That's the opportunity that you have. And I just view myself as having the opportunity to help you get to be that hero. And that keeps me going every single day.
Thank you. Our next question is from Megan H. And this will be directed to both panelists. Her question is, can you list some possible careers where there is field action, like cleaning up oceans, but also behind the scenes and part of a company? I'll leave it to you guys to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. There are definitely a lot of groups. I mean, there's no shortage, I think, of organizations out there that want to address issues like climate or ocean trash or overfishing. Each one has a slightly different tactic to it, and I think there are different scales, which means there are going to be different opportunities and positions. But there are lots of groups that are doing beach cleanup work So I know a bunch of people at places like zoos and aquariums that do beach cleanup works as part of their education campaigns. There are also groups dedicated just to beach cleanups. And I know a few in the kind of Bay Area in California. I think this comes into figuring out and trying a few different things to figure out what are the aspects that you want. Because there are going to be some people that realize like, wow, I just really want to be out in the field. And then there are some people that are like, I kind of just want to be behind a desk. And like, that's my skill set. And then there's a mixture. Every organization will be a little bit different. So try out, figure out what you want, and then ask some questions while you're there. And I know for me and a lot of my colleagues, what job you get when you first get to an organization does not need to be the thing that you stay in. Like it can evolve. So when I first got to the Marine Mammal Center 12 years ago, we didn't have anything about climate change, actually. We barely had anything about overfishing. And the few things we did were around trash. Because that was just super obvious. We had a seal with like a piece of trash around its neck. It's hard not to then talk about it. And I started talking to my colleagues and my bosses and said, wow, climate change is such a big issue. We should be talking about this. And their response was like, we don't disagree, but that's a big thing. Like, who's going to do it? And it was like, I'll do it. And here's the little bit I can do now. And here's what I could do if you give me a little bit more time, or if you take a few things off my plate. And we had a conversation, but I went in with it saying, this is what will make the organization better. Here's what will be better for the animals, which is what we do so much work around. And here's how I can be a part of it. So it was kind of finding that value, what's in it for them, that allowed me to start tweaking things a little bit. And I was able to get an entire climate change program out of it over time. So just play around a little bit as you get to some of these organizations, and you might have the opportunity, particularly if you've got some skill sets that you can offer, to find that like hybrid role that it seems like you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say in California, an organization that I really, well, I respect many organizations, but for your question, the Local Government Commission and the work with Civic Spark, where they're giving people kind of field experience in local governments, if you wanted to go in that space where you're actually doing work, and it could be a slew of different things, but you're also learning the administration behind the scenes. So you're kind of getting to put a toe in both spaces. And then to a further refinement of Adam's point would be, if you think that you might be more interested in outdoor work, look at the national park system. If you think that you might be more inclined to want to do kind of behind the scenes matchmaking, look at like more traditional organizations, and it can change and does change all the time. Even in my shop, tomorrow morning, we're going to be out volunteering. You know, it's part of our team building exercise, but we'll be planting trees in the spring. So it's just a different kind of interface. Yeah, lots of opportunities.
Thank you.
This next question is actually from myself. And Adam, I was wondering if you could tell us more about that book that you took the quote from.
Sure, and I'll put it in the chat box. So the book is called Drawdown, and there's an entire organization built around it as well. And there are local chapters all around the country as well. So you might, depending on where you are, there might be something that your county, for example, has put together. But basically what they did is they took a mathematical approach to climate change solutions. They said, all right, it's one thing to say like, yeah, you should put solar on your roof or skip a meat dish a week. But like, what does that really translate to in terms of carbon pollution? And they had some really smart people able to put numbers to all this stuff. And they were able to basically show, here are the top 100 solutions if we're going to address climate change. And there were some really fascinating results that came from it. In the top 3 is educating girls and women around the world. And that could seem a little disjointed and weird, because it's like, all right, well, how does teaching specifically girls and women solve climate change better than putting solar panels on your roof? And it comes down to, well, if you provide those opportunities and that access and that equitable kind of opportunities throughout things, all of a sudden you can now empower people to be part of the solution. And it results in things like better population control, It is better education levels, better job opportunities. So it's a really fascinating read. It's very scientific, I would say, but their website does make it a little bit more easier to kind of follow than the book. But the book is definitely good if you want to look at climate solutions.
Thank you. I'll definitely try to find that. Next question is from Sarah for both students, and she's wondering if you could briefly give just like a general piece of advice to students who are interested in climate careers and climate education.
A general piece, I'm sorry, I didn't see it in the chat. So a general piece of advice?
Yeah, like what would you advise to high school students or maybe college students who are hoping to major in something and then later on have a career in the climate?
Wow, this is going to feel so unfulfilling. That based on my experience would be, my education taught me to think critically. It didn't prepare me for the job specifically. It just gave me the general skills. I am a privileged white woman who is overeducated. So I'm going to name that. Connections have really helped me get where I am. Right. Sure, I had to walk through a door, but someone helped open the door for me. Like they cracked it open. And so I never take for granted the people and the mentors that I had and the opportunities that presented themselves. So my advice would be, I kind of sound like a broken record, invest in people and invest in relationships. Like that to me, even if that's a recycling club that you're a part of, or environmental club at school, work with that professor, get to know them, and get to know people that are often unseen. Staff do most of the work at places. You know, we tend to gravitate towards the main decision maker, but staff are actually the ones who get things done. So know the people doing the work. Like invest in those types of relationships. You will learn so much from those folks, and those folks will be the next generation of bosses. And now you've got a relationship with someone who could help you continue to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree in that with Missy, and the benefits to having some of those conversations with people. There are a lot of organizations that are willing to do interviews for perspective, just career people, like not a job interview, but just an informational interview. So feel free to ask. Like the worst thing they could say is like, no, we're quite busy. But on their website, they might have a contact us or ask us a question type of thing. The other piece that I'll say is that climate in particular is amazing in the sense that everything we do, no matter where you live or what you do for a living, climate touches our lives in some way. It's also what makes it the most horrible thing ever. But what it allows for is figure out your particular niche, figure out your passion within climate, where you would be able to wake up each morning and be really excited to learn more. So for me, it was through the lens of animals that got me started, because I love that. And there are these questions I want, but I'm doing climate work through that. And maybe it's something around plants. Maybe it's about particular elements of people and communities. So it's, I want to help this group that's in this part of the city that I live in. Or maybe it's, I'm just really kind of intrigued by engineering. And I want to put that to the skills of how do we develop buildings that are better for the climate? Because that's going to be what is really exciting. I can't believe I'm actually quoting this person like as a professional thing, but I did come across a quote pretty recently from Mark Cuban, who is like on Shark Tank and like the GM of a basketball team. But he said, one very valuable trick is once you graduate, find jobs that pay you to learn. And I think it's actually really amazing because that's how in school I figured out the path I wanted to be on. It was, I'm sitting through this class and I'm hating it. And doing the homework is just a pain. I'm not interested. And it just feels like I'm doing it because I have to do it. And then there were those days where I came home and there was a homework assignment or a class and I was like, I can't wait to do that assignment. Put your energy towards that. And that's going to help you figure out where you want to go when there are tons of options out there when it comes to climate change.
Thank you. Just want to say before I move on to the next question, we will be going up to 7:10 with questions. It did say on the Eventbrite that we will go until 7, but panelists are so interesting, we want to hear more about them. Our next question is from Julia E. This will be directed towards Adam. And her question is, I have an interest in wildlife biology. Are there careers that include working in national parks in the US while still contributing to climate change?
Absolutely. National parks, state parks, county parks are a great place to look for jobs and internships and volunteer opportunities. I have a very, very good friend that works at Point Reyes National Seashore, so just a little bit north of San Francisco. And it's one of the largest rookeries or breeding grounds for elephant seals and harbor seals. And what her job is she helps monitor those populations. Because we want to know, is the population growing? Is it shrinking? Is it shifting where it's popping up? So she's out there and has a whole team that is counting all these animals and looking at their behavior. And that directly allows us to understand how they are changing their behaviors as a result of things like climate and other things. So there are tons of opportunities with the national parks because they really are dedicated to nature, and climate is such a big part of their mission. So it's either in the communication and education side that you can do it, or in the research and science side. There are opportunities for both.
Thank you.
And this question is for either panelist, from Diana S. And she asks, what majors do you recommend pursuing in college to get started in the sustainability field?
You're off mute, Adam. Go for it.
Sure. This is what happens when I just never went on to mute. So I think Missy did mention this in her presentation. I wouldn't necessarily put all your eggs in the basket that you have to take particular classes or major in particular things to end up with a particular job. I'm not saying like, don't pick a major and like, just do it willy-nilly, but just don't think that that dictates your future. So the advice I've always given people, and I kind of live this myself, is take a bunch of classes that seem like they would interest you. And then see where that leads, because you might get answers after each one. Like I took a biology class, and I was like, okay, I love the ecology side of it. I loved this ecosystem type of thing and how one animal interacts with another and everything changes. And I hated when we had to learn about genetics. So, okay, let's deal with things I can see, not things I can't see. And then I took a psychology class, and I wound up studying all of these things related to animal or to human behavior. Like, why do we do the things we do? Which is a fascinating question. And then I started thinking, why do the animals I just learned about in that class do the things that they do? So then I took an animal behavior class because I was like, those combine the two things. And I just kept building in that way. So definitely think about big chunks. What are the things that I would be excited to learn about? If you want to get into sustainability or conservation, things like biology definitely help. If you want to know about how the system works, so that you can think about it in that big picture. But I think there's another question about engineering in specific. That is definitely a big part of sustainability. People, and how do you care for people, and anthropology, and how do we figure out the systems that have resulted in where we are today. All of those are connected in different ways. It just depends what aspect of climate you want to do.
Everything, Adam said this before, climate touches everything. It's the beauty and the terror of climate change in some ways. So if you find that you're really inspired by public health and you want to be a doctor, or you want to be a nurse or a clinician, I need people who can understand climate and public health and what it means on the body, because medical professionals are not trained to think about a heat wave and that heat wave being a trigger assigned to climate change. So I'm collecting data now on how climate change is affecting public health. And medical professionals are really, really trusted. And so if someone's giving advice to you and it's a doctor, you listen to that advice. I need people who understand how to design bridges and infrastructure to handle changes in climate, but also not just to be hard physical infrastructure, to be sequestering carbon and thinking differently about the materials we use and how those are used. I need architects who design infrastructure that's living. I need social scientists who can talk to people. I need educators and teachers who can bring this topic up in a way that's age appropriate and gentle and empowering and yet serious. It doesn't matter what you are inspired by, explore and experiment, and we need you to bring climate into that space. This just has to infiltrate everything that we do if we're going to be effective.
This next question is from Pasang L for Adam, and they ask, does your organization provide any internship or volunteer for college students?
I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to keep this very short. Yes, absolutely. We have over 1,000 volunteers that help us, actually closer to 1,400 volunteers, and we've got internship opportunities. So I will put it in the chat box so you can go to our website and learn more.
Thank you. Our next question is from Simon, and we can direct this to both. The question is, what kind of engineering careers are involved in climate change? More particularly, what kind of engineers have both of you been able to work with?
My mind's going in two ways on this. One is a piece of research I did for the Kresge Foundation, where we were looking at all professional societies and how they were integrating climate change into their work. And the answer is they are. So it doesn't matter if it's civil engineering, mechanical engineering, climate is a part of the training. It may not be in the classroom, although it is more and more in the classroom. It is also, though, as professionals, in terms of maintaining your credentials, it's now becoming to be an expectation that you're thinking and integrating climate change into that. So kind of everywhere. And then in terms of work, fascinating array of ways that I get to work with engineers. One of my dear friends who I was on a call with today is an engineer who we did our PhD together, and she works on renewable energy systems, and she's a planner. And so we're working on programs at the state level. I get to work with the engineering department, who some folks, I do pipes. This is what I do. And I get to break open their world and say, how are you designing those pipes for the climate of 20 years from now? How are you integrating changing precipitation patterns? And so we get to kind of wrestle with wicked questions. And then I get to work with the other kinds of engineers on the team who are just like, I don't want to think inside the box. Let's blow it open. How can I completely restructure roads? And where do we put protected bike lanes? And how do I slow traffic down to a point that it really does incentivize transit usage and more walking and biking? And how do I get into land use? So I get the pleasure of working with the entire spectrum of the stereotype of engineers. I'm not sure that's even useful as a statement, but that is true.
And I'll add just one extra thing as well, because again, it's the work I do at the Marine Mammal Center taking care of the animals is indirectly tied to climate change. We've got more direct things that we do as well, but we depend on engineers to run our filter system. You think about all the pools, all the water our animals need. So we've got a whole team here of engineers that are making sure that the animals we're rescuing and taking care of have a safe and healthy place to be while we get them ready to go back out to the ocean. So definitely ways that you can plug in your skills into lots of different groups. Any place that has animals will also have engineers for their life support systems that are necessary.
Thank you. And that will conclude our Q&A section. Before everyone starts leaving the meeting, I just want to, for everyone who's left, launch a quick poll just to gauge how this went for everyone. But otherwise, feel free to leave. Feel free to stick around and chat, and you can unmute yourselves, turn on your video, whatever you want to do in our last few minutes here. Once again, thank you everyone so much for attending our second Climate Careers Chat. And we had some fantastic panelists today, some amazing presentations, and it was just overall very inspiring. And also a huge thanks goes out to everyone who worked on the Climate Careers Chat and the panelists themselves who made this all possible.
Yeah, I just want to shout out again to our leadership team. This entire presentation has been organized behind the scenes. We've been working on this for a very long time by a little group called Sustainable Leaders in Action. We are run entirely by high school and college students based in Contra Costa County, and our work focuses on creating a healthier, cleaner, and safer community. So we encourage high school and college students that are watching this presentation especially, but of course we encourage you to send this to other people based in Contra Costa County to join SLIA. While there is a time commitment involved in joining this team, advantages you can gain from joining SLIA are professional and developmental experience, internship opportunities for committed members, and a better understanding of how to take care of our planet. And of course, you can do stuff like this. You can put on a whole climate careers chat when you have the time to. There's a bunch of ways you can get involved with us. And if you are interested in joining Sustainable Leaders in Action, you can contact Karen Rosenberg for more information. And her email will be sent in the chat shortly.
And we have just dropped a mailing list sign up, so you can stay tuned for our next Climate Careers Chat. To give everyone an idea, we were planning to have this maybe quarterly or monthly. We're still working out the date, but we do definitely want to have this as a recurring and often event.
And with that, I just want to say that we can't be more thankful to everyone who showed up to be part of this event, from the SLIA members working behind the scenes right now that have been navigating the chat, to our wonderful panelists. We thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to educate us about careers in the sustainability field. If you have any questions, you can stick around shortly and talk to our panelists some more. Once again, thank you all for coming, and we hope that you had a wonderful time. Bye, everyone.
Hey Isabel, and Max, but I actually had a question. Do you have to pay to join your Sustainable Leaders in Action?
No, this is all completely free, and we do volunteer work here.
Oh,
yes.
That's cool. Okay.
Yes.
And I also had a question for the panelists. Thank you guys, by the way. I asked this in the chat, but how do you deal with, like, you see the effects of climate change on the environment, like, every day? That's part of your job. How do you deal with those who are not in the field? Like, how do you not bring that up? How do you, like, see things that might be affecting the environment but just not comment on it? Because I struggle with that.
I don't know that I don't bring it up is perhaps the thing, but I bring it up gently or in a way that I think they can receive it. And it also depends on who it is, right? You know, like a conversation with one of my best friends, they know well enough that it's going to get brought up and we're going to talk about it, versus a neighbor might be a more gentle, like, isn't this interesting to see what's happening? And we would sort of like transition into that. I'm not sure if you have a specific, I would totally brainstorm with you, but generally speaking, I don't shy away from talking about it. To me, we have to name what we see for other people to be able to see it too.
Yeah, I would agree. I think my strategy, because I don't like conflict and I don't want to go into an argument with someone type of thing, as long as you stay on the positive, it's going to go a lot farther. So there's a online magazine called Grist, Grist, that I follow, and I absolutely love them. And their tagline is, and I can never get the words exactly right, but something along the lines of, we tell stories of an unbelievably amazing world that people want right now. So I use that example to talk about when we think about the actions that we want to do with climate change. Let's talk about how amazing things are happening that are going to benefit everyone. And you're not going to find a lot of people that are like, no, 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 I don't want super inspirational, awesome things that make my life better. Rather than focusing on like, hey, like hurricanes are getting stronger and like stuff that could immediately make people kind of shut down a little bit. So you can kind of pick and choose your path a little bit on that. But positive will get you farther if you focus on solutions rather than the problems themselves.
That was great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Megan.
And yeah, Sarah, I completely agree with that. My family's tired of hearing me going off about all my little facts that I find, especially since I'm the vegan one now. So I'm like, hey, you should have this instead.
Oh yeah, I agree. That's me. I push to not put stuff down the garbage disposal, right? To make it easier for the water district to clean the water. So I dump the food and the dishes in the trash. I always tell my parents, no, don't put it down the garbage disposal. I'm like, blah, 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 it's easier. But no, the water district, guys. The water district.
Same.
You know, I'm going to share a pet peeve that I have, and it's probably not going to make you really happy. But one of the things that I struggle with is our individual behaviors matter, but not as much as systems change. And so I try not to poke at the people. I try to poke at the system, right? So the optimism is helping people get to a good decision. You know, I am not a vegan. I tried it for a while. I am vegetarian and have been for a very, very long time. But my husband and daughter aren't, and I don't blame them for that. Meat is delicious. You're evolutionarily designed to eat that meat. But can we lower the amount of consumption? Yeah, we do. Or when we purchase it, can we make sure that those animals are raised, you know, pasture raised, have good lives, they're treated fairly, you know, coming from local farms? Like there's movement, but the problem is in most of our life, you don't actually have a lot of good choices. Like the system is not set up to make this easy to do the right thing. So if we're going to get angry and we're going to take that like venom that you probably feel in your tummy, I want it directed at that. I want to fix the system.
We actually had I'm not sure if you know about the Sustainable Contra Costa challenge, but it's like an online platform that GoCo runs, and like households and community groups can sign up to take actions that actually log your carbon deficit that you create, like how much carbon emissions you stop by taking these actions, like don't heat your house as much, or run your AC as much, or bike to work instead of driving. But one of them that we actually did as a group in SLIA is eating lower down the carbon food chain. So eat more like eggs or chicken or fish instead of larger mammals that produce a lot of carbon emissions. Adam, actually, a quick question for you. I recently did all my college applications, and I declared ecology as my major and biology as a second if they didn't have ecology. And you're talking about how the Marine Mammal Center has like volunteer and internship positions. Do you have anything that kind of deals with like habitat loss, or like I'm really interested in how like plants and animals and the habitat they live in, how that whole system is being affected by climate change, like gas or pollution in the ocean or anything like that. I wonder if you could like talk about the opportunities a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you can explore a little bit on the website, all of the different things that we do. What I would say is for college internships, there are kind of two that rise to the top a little bit. Some of them are going to be a lot more technical. So like our internships that are for like graduates of college that are in vet school just isn't as applicable right now. But we've got one that deals with rescue. So where you can kind of work alongside and help with the animals. The other one's one that I work really closely with, which is our conservation education one. So you're not doing hands-on research per se, but what you're doing is you're taking the research and we're figuring out ways to share that story. So whether that's through online programming, whether that's through creating handouts and pages for our website, whatever it might be. So you're going to get all of that rich content that I think you want around what are the risks of habitat loss for animals. But it's going to be in a way of I learn it and then I need to figure out, working with all these other great experts, of how do we talk about it. So that would be one to explore. We do that one quarterly. And right now, and probably for a while, it's going to be fully remote. But there are things, if you stay in the Bay Area, that once COVID kind of passes, there could be on-site opportunities as well for you.
Okay. And information for that's on your website, right?
Yeah, I put it in the chat box. I can try and look back and just re-paste it if you're interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll look into those.
I wanted to say really quickly, is this, oh no, is my mic not
We
working?
can hear you.
No,
We can
we
hear
can
you.
hear
Sarah.
Oh, okay, shoot, okay. So I just wanted to say, well, your like advice pertaining to like, you know, how you ended up and like your whole story, it was really nice to hear, because I know a lot of students are kind of like up in the air about things, or they take like really tough classes in no particular direction, like not because they want to explore, but because they think they have to take these classes to like go somewhere and they'll figure it out later. Like I like that you don't over like emphasize that like you need to pick a path like from the beginning, like eventually you'll end up where you are because of what you're interested in. Like I really like that fact, like you just do what you like and eventually you'll get there. And I really like that message. I wanted to tell you guys about that. I really like that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Sarah, and resonate with that same thing. And then Missy, I just had a question for you. So I know like a lot of this stuff is mostly on the system. How would you suggest that sustainable leaders in action or other youth get involved with changing the system, since we don't have that much power?
Oh, you have so much power. I mean, yeah, you may not have power in the traditional sense, especially if you're not of voting age, right? Because in America, we vote in two ways. You vote at the ballot box and you vote with your dollar. And so voting with what you buy and what you do not buy actually sends an incredible market signal. And you are the largest purchasing block. And so you can completely transform send signals for what it is you want and what you're willing on accepting, what you're not willing on accepting, and the market will move. I think also being loud, like that's what we're seeing, like just actually getting involved. You know, you can buy stock in a company, one stock, and you are allowed to vote. You know, you can show up, you can mobilize. Look what just happened over the last few days with GameStop. You know, like I think about, I don't know if anyone's following this, like this is a fascinating movement where people are sort of saying like, no corporate America, you are not going to make this money on the backs of us anymore. You can short the system and get profit on us, but when we try to short it, you shut us down. Like naming these kinds of things are powerful, pushing back on the system and just saying like, that's not acceptable. I'm sort of at a loss in some ways for what you couldn't do in that way. If you mobilize, sue, like just start lawsuits, sue us for taking your future away. I mean, like I do it. It's probably not super actionable for you, but I don't know. The office that I run, our motto is we walk the line of possibility. So everything that we think about is not what can we do, it's what should we do, and then we try to find a way to do it. And a lot of times we do bump up against laws and regulations that say we can't. Those are written by humans, which means we can rewrite them. They are not sacred. They're not carved in some holy stone that we hold. We wrote them. And so I just don't take no for an answer in that space, and I don't think you should either.
I really admired that from you. Just like hearing your story, you're just like, no, I'm not taking that job. And then you're like, okay, fine if I do, but you have to give me all these things, otherwise I won't do it. And that was amazing.
That's really kind, but I would say remember that I have power, right? Like I would never put my staff in a position like that. You know, I knew that I had security, I had another job, and my job now is powerful. Like I have influence. I am an executive of the city. I make decisions about the city. And so I have to use that power and that influence because I have it. So I just want to, I did not come out of undergrad and like walk into my first job and start negotiating in this way. I certainly learned to find my voice and that no one was going to advocate for me other than myself. Like I was going to be the best advocate. And I needed to learn to talk about what I was capable of doing and own it, right? And really own my story. I am now at a point where I don't have patience for BS anymore, but I didn't at 18 and I didn't at 21. And my story at 23 was different too. So you'll get there.
I have a question for you, Missy. So what you said about like considering race and minority when you were talking about fighting climate change, and you brought up how like it's starting to be considered here in the West, but you brought up Papua New Guinea and it's not, even though it's been severely impacted by it. Because like my family comes from a place where like pollution is just so normalized. Like if here is bad, there is worse. And it's like the line between clean and polluted is so blurred that it's just so intersected everywhere you look in society. So my question is like, how do you advocate for that? And especially in the West, where people don't necessarily know where, like the people can't necessarily put words to like mental images together.
Gosh, it's such a good layered question. And I would actually like to hear Adam's response too. I'm probably not gonna do it full justice. One is we live in a really an interconnected world. And if, COVID obviously showed that. COVID also laid bare the disparities that exist in our system, right? The underlying systemic issues, racism, economic, socioeconomic disparities that exist and who's disproportionately burdened. And those are the same populations that have been disproportionately burdened by disasters and climate change and our extractive economy in the domestic sense. We're also seeing, think about vaccine rollouts. Who's getting the vaccine? The US, the UK, the countries that are putting a whole bunch of money, up and saying, and who's not getting it? 60 million vaccines going to Africa. Like we don't even name a country. We just say the whole continent of Africa gets this because they don't have refrigeration systems to take it. Like that's a problem, right? And so I think more and more recognition is starting to emerge, perhaps not in like the east, west, north, south kind of dynamic that you might be talking about, Isabella, but certainly in the disparities broadly. And if we can start to see it here, I think it does open eyes to other places where that disparity exists. And if there is a silver lining of COVID, it was the earth breathed. Like we could see things happening. We could see mountain ranges that people were next to that they could not see before. We saw water that looked cleaner than it's ever looked before. Our air was better because we didn't have vehicular emissions moving through. And I think there's just shame on us. Is how I'll say this. Shame on us if we don't use this window of opportunity that's been presented to us to do something different, to be different than what we were before.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and the things in addition to what Missy shared that kind of come to mind, I think part of it is around storytelling and bringing those things to the forefront and talking about them in a way that's powerful, where people feel a connection, where it's not just to steal something that is just so common and has been over the years of like climate change isn't here yet. Like it's not a problem that we have. And it's like, actually it is, but maybe not in your community. Like it's been affecting people all along. And unfortunately that excuse and whatever it is like no longer relevant because climate change is continuing to get worse, but it's that mindset. And I think trying to elevate those voices, elevate those experiences and talk to the heart and the head rather than just talking to the head in a sense. Like how do we get people to see how related and alike we are rather than dislike? And that won't solve everything. There are a lot of other issues at play, but I think that's one thing. The other, I think, is highlighting co-benefits a little bit more and highlighting that by taking environmental action, we are creating so many different things that make life better for so many more people. And I think that helps expand it so that if people are thinking like, I personally I'm not an environmentalist type of thing, like that ethos, it's like, all right, so don't do it for the environment, but what else do you value here that gets a lot better? Maybe it's about protection and safety. So as we do some of these things, it winds up creating healthier habitats for people and protection on that, as well as it helps with creating enough plants that we're sucking out carbon and a carbon sink and all those things. So it depends on what region, obviously, you're talking about, but that's just a way if you get the sense that people really aren't feeling connected to that cause, let's figure out what's the co-benefit that they might be connected to. Because I don't care, if I'm being brutally honest, I do not care if you believe in climate change. Would I like you to believe in climate change? 100%. But if you are taking action that winds up reducing your carbon footprint, and you take action that helps reduce your community's carbon footprint, we're on the same team, even if you say climate change doesn't exist. All I care about is the end result in the end of this. Let's make sure people are safe. Let's make sure people are happy. They have opportunities. We can let everything else kind of go by the wayside.
You know, on Adam's point, I think one last thing that I've learned from this role is exactly what he said. And sometimes the people that I have the most tense disagreements with are the people who would be on the same side, in air quotes, but they're picking over things. You know, like we're in a battle to the death about where renewable energy is going to go. We all agree we should have it, and instead we're fighting over I am having this fight right now in my community. They want it local, right? Like we want all of our renewable energy in our community. Well, newsflash, we are a developed city and we can get 78 megawatts in rooftop. We use 440. I can't, right? I can't do it, but it's a battle to the death. And so in some ways, sometimes it's harder with your allies to actually get the work done. Whereas someone else is like, of course, I want clean energy because it's cheaper. I don't care that it's saving the climate. I care that my energy bill is going to go down with this like clean source of energy. Great. Sometimes devil really is in the details on these things.
Thank you. Okay, well, I know it is late and I know it's even later for Missy. So, and because of that, I am extremely more grateful that you guys have stayed 35 minutes after we said that this event would end. Just to talk to us, really. So thank you so much for
Thank you
doing this for us.
so much.
Yes.
Our pleasure.
Of course, thank you for all the work that went into this. You did a lion's share of all the planning and the tech and everything else. So you did an amazing job. So thank you for having us and giving us this platform. It's an amazing program you've put together.
Yeah, congratulations. Can't wait to work with you guys in the field.
I'll see you someday.
Yeah. We're looking forward.
All right, bye everyone. I'm going to bed.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.